On my shelf sits a jar of soap that cost me absolutely nothing. Not nearly nothing. Zero. One of the ingredients was right next to my fireplace, and the other was sitting in my kitchen. I was actually planning to throw one of them away. This soap cleans, it lathers, and it feels better on my skin than most products I have paid for. The raw material is sitting next to your fireplace at this very moment. This is the soap used by the Vikings. The soap of the frontier family was made from scratch every autumn, and I am going to show you exactly how to make it. I will be completely honest with you about the final result because most videos on this topic either skip that part or get it entirely wrong. You already know what happens when ash gets wet. That gray slurry when rain hits a cold fire pit, or the dark, slightly slimy residue on your hands after handling damp ash. That slick, almost soapy feeling isn't your imagination. When water passes through wood ash, it dissolves the potassium compounds inside and carries them into a solution. The resulting liquid is alkaline enough to begin breaking down fats on contact, which is, at a molecular level, exactly what soap does. This reaction is called saponification. Fat meets alkali. They break apart and reassemble into two things: soap, the fatty acid salt that cleans, and glycerin, the moisturizing byproduct that expensive handmade soaps advertise as a major selling point. That reaction has been occurring wherever ash met rain and fat met water for as long as fire has existed. Around 5,000 years ago, people noticed this and started doing it on purpose. The oldest documented soap recipe was recorded in Sumer around 2800 BCE, using ash and rendered fat combined and heated. The Egyptians documented it, and the Romans scaled it up. By the Norse era, soap making from wood ash was so embedded in daily life that the word lye, the English word for the alkaline liquid that makes soap possible, comes directly from the Proto-Germanic root meaning to wash. The chemistry was the same, the ash was the same, and the fat was the same. The only thing that has changed over 5,000 years is the jar you store it in. Here is exactly what you need, and this is genuinely all of it. First, wood ash, specifically hardwood like oak, hickory, maple, or beech. Hardwood burns hotter and cleaner, producing ash with a higher concentration of potassium salts. You want the fine pale gray powder from a fully burned fire, not the dark chunky charcoal from an incomplete burn. Sift out any large black pieces. The whiter and finer the ash, the stronger your lye will be. Next, you need rainwater or distilled water, not tap water. Tap water contains minerals that interfere with the leaching process. A bucket left outside does the job perfectly. You also need free fat. Rendered tallow or lard produces the most reliable soap with a good lather. Olive oil makes a gentler soap, while coconut oil makes a harder, higher lathering one. Whatever you have available warmed until it is liquid. You will need a wooden, plastic, or stainless steel container for leaching. Do not use aluminum, as lye dissolves aluminum and produces hydrogen gas. Most importantly, you must have rubber gloves and a bottle of vinegar kept close by. This is not optional. Lye is genuinely caustic and will start saponifying the oils in your skin on contact, which is as unpleasant as it sounds. Vinegar neutralizes it immediately. Wear gloves every single time you handle the lye. That is it. This is how it all goes together. Fill your leaching container loosely with hardwood ash. Line the bottom with a piece of cloth or straw to act as a filter and create a small drain hole at the base so the liquid can drip into a collection vessel below. Pour rainwater slowly over the ash. Let it percolate down and drip out the bottom. That dark, tea-colored liquid with a slightly slick feel is your lye. Pour it through the ash 2 or 3 more times to increase its concentration. Now here is the test the Vikings used, and it still works perfectly today. Drop a fresh egg into the lye solution. If it sinks, the lye is too weak, so run it through the ash again. If it floats with roughly a quarter of its surface above the liquid, the concentration is correct. If it bobs very high, dilute it with a little water. A raw potato works the same way. This is original quality control for a process that predates chemistry labs by 5,000 years. Once your lye passes the test, combine it with your fat. For a first batch, use enough for roughly a quart jar of finished soap, 2 cups of rendered fat, Warm to around 40 to 50 degrees Celsius, just above body temperature, and 2/3 of a cup of lye solution. That is the traditional 3-to-1 ratio by volume. Pour the lye slowly into the warm fat. Never the other way around. Always add lye into fat. Stir constantly. The mixture will cloud and thicken almost immediately. Heat it gently over low heat, stirring regularly. This is the hot process. You are cooking the saponification rather than waiting weeks for it to happen at room temperature. Give it several hours. The mixture will move through stages: waxy, then grainy, then glossy and paste-like, similar to thick mashed potatoes. When a small piece on your tongue gives a faint zap, like touching a weak battery, saponification is nearly complete. When that zap disappears entirely, it is done. Here is the one thing people often get wrong the first time. They expect it to turn into a hard bar. It won't. This lye is potassium-based, and potassium soap is naturally soft. What you will have is a smooth, scoopable paste that goes into a jar. That is correct. That is what it is supposed to be. Scoop a small amount onto your hands, work it into a lather with water, and wash. If you want something firmer, add 2 tablespoons of plain table salt during the last 30 minutes of cooking. The sodium partially displaces the potassium, making the soap less water-soluble and firmer. You can then press it into a mold and let it cure for 2 to 4 weeks, where it will firm up further as water evaporates. This is a documented technique from soap-making manuals of the 1700s. Store it in a glass jar or a wooden mold lined with parchment, never aluminum or tin. Now here is my personal version, the one I actually use. Once the soap is cooked and still warm off the heat, I stir in a small handful of dried mint leaves ground to a rough powder. Mint grows like it is trying to take over my garden. Plant it once, and you will have more than you know what to do with for the rest of your life. It adds a faint natural scent and a slight texture I have come to prefer over smooth commercial soap. I also add dried lavender. I planted it once, about 10 years ago, and now I have a full patch along the south side of the house. Lavender has documented natural antimicrobial properties, not just a folk claim, but actual pharmacological activity, which complements what the soap is already doing and leaves the skin feeling genuinely good rather than stripped. This combination is what I use for shaving. I will say this directly. Nothing I have ever paid for has left my face feeling the way this does. The glycerin formed during saponification stays in the soap instead of being extracted like it is in commercial bars. That is the difference you feel. If you don't have mint or lavender, 5 drops of each as essential oil stirred in at the same final stage gets you essentially the same result. These are available at any health food store or online for a few dollars and will last for years of batches. Your soap, your scent. That is the point. Before I reach the conclusion, there is one more reason I make this myself, and I would be doing you a disservice not to mention it. If you have been paying any attention at all to what goes into commercial soap and personal care products, you already know the situation is bad. Parabens, phthalates, synthetic fragrances, sodium lauryl sulfate, and triclosan are not obscure fringe concerns. They are documented endocrine disruptors and hormone mimickers that appear on ingredient lists of products people use on their skin every single day. Your skin is not a barrier that stops everything. It is a membrane. What you put on it absorbs into your bloodstream. That is the same mechanism behind nicotine patches and hormone therapy creams. It works because the skin absorbs. According to the Environmental Working Group, the average person applies between 9 and 15 personal care products daily, exposing themselves to over 100 unique chemical ingredients before they even leave the house in the morning. I am not telling you this to make you afraid. I am telling you that knowing how to make your own soap from 2 ingredients you already have means you know exactly what is in it. Nothing is hidden. There are no 12-syllable names you cannot pronounce. Just fat and ash. The same 2 things that kept people clean for 5,000 years before a laboratory ever got involved. And that is also why I make my own deodorant. But that is a topic for a different video. The thing that keeps sticking with me is how completely this process was replaced. It wasn't because it stopped working, but because someone figured out how to sell you an alternative. Commercial soap production using refined sodium hydroxide began in earnest in the early 19th century. By the mid-1800s, companies like Procter & Gamble founded in Cincinnati in 1837, had industrialized it into millions of identical bars. By 1879, ivory soap was advertising that it floated. By the early 20th century, making soap from ash had drifted from a common household skill to something eccentric, and then it was forgotten. However, the ash from your fireplace still contains exactly the same compounds it always did. The fat in your kitchen still saponifies the same way it did in Sumer. The egg test still works, and the zap test still works. The raw materials are in your house right now, and they always have been. I don't know what your situation is or why you are watching this. Maybe you want to close one more loop towards self-sufficiency. Maybe soap is the prep item you hadn't thought about yet. Maybe you just like knowing how things actually work and ended up here at midnight, following a question you couldn't stop pulling on. It doesn't matter. It works either way. Now you know how. If this journey into the ancient chemistry of your fireplace has changed the way you look at the resources around you, please subscribe and like the channel. We are unearthing the history and the skills that the modern world has tried to bury. Let's reclaim our self-sufficiency. The next chapter of forgotten knowledge will be open soon.